So NFL football at Christmas. Saturday games come into play. We're going to pick all the games a little bit later on, and obviously key in quite heavily on the small matter of the Eagles-Cowboys. Saturday games, and then you've got, I did the maths, in 9 days, the season gets sorted out, right? So you know who's made the playoffs, and then you have Black Monday, straight after the final game of the season, when it's say goodnight Gracie to quite a few coaches, some more obvious than others, right? So it looks pretty clear that, for example, Doug Marone's going to go. Coughlin out in the last 24 hours. It looks like Marone will be out the door at Jacksonville as well. Jason...
Why is Coughlin still around?
What do you mean? In football generally?
Yeah.
Well, I guess...
It's horrendous. I mean, horrendous football to watch. Not a pleasant person.
Successful.
When?
Well, he won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants.
When Eli was young.
Yeah.
And one of them was a stupid play off the helmet. But like this down to him.
There were a lot of lucky. You could argue a lot of teams have lucky breaks.
Yeah, I don't like him.
Okay,
but he's not my least favorite coach in the.
Who's your least favorite coach in the NFL?
I think you were about to mention him.
Jason Garrett.
Oh my god.
Well, oh my god. So basically, any NFC East coach you dislike, other than an Eagles.
Well,
coach.
I like Doug. Doug Peterson, obviously.
Yeah.
But no. Okay, so no, with Garrett, it's different, right? So
what is it about Garrett you don't like?
Well, Garrett's a Princeton guy, which, my alma mater, Penn. We competed with Princeton for the coveted Ivy League title. And don't laugh, there are Ivy League players in the NFL. Not many over the years.
Fitz is an Ivy League player, right?
He is one. That's right. He went to Harvard. You had the I'm blanking on his name. He was really good. He went to Columbia. He's retired now. Marcellus
Wallace?
Is that the guy I'm thinking? Like went to Columbia.
Bennett.
One of those dudes went to Columbia. They hadn't won a game for like a million years. I think they hadn't won a game for. There's a great podcast telling this guy's whole story about how like he could have gone to Stanford or.
Oh, Marcellus Wiley.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
But he was. He was a serious NFL player.
Yeah,
he wasn't like he wasn't like Jay Fiedler or whatever, right? Or Keith Elias,
Fitz is a serious NFL player. Anyway, so
yes, he is. But Fitz is a quarterback.
Yes,
that's slightly different, right? And he's super smart and whatever, and he beat us this year somehow. So.
Is there anything better in the NFL right now than watching Fitz scramble for a 10-yard gain?
I don't know how. I don't know how he does it. How he does it at his age. I mean, I think that is the element of brains, of timing, of people can say, oh, but he's maniacal about how he looks after that. If this guy were a natural born athlete, he would not have gone to play football at Harvard. He simply wouldn't, right? He would have gotten the same quality of education at Stanford and become, if he was that good. I have so much respect for him because he eked out a career. And it's interesting because I mentioned Jay Fiedler before, who played briefly. And Jay Fiedler was a freak athlete by Ivy League standards. And he was drafted. You probably know better than me what kind of career he had in the NFL. He hung around for a while.
He had a cup of coffee.
He held a clipboard and whatever.
Yeah.
But that guy had physical gifts that I think Fitzpatrick didn't have. And look, when I say didn't, it's all relative, right? I mean, compared to the top 0.1% of the population.
Yeah.
But to be able to do that for so long with so many different teams, it just shows you how these guys, even the ones that we think aren't super smart, like Roethlisberger or Cam Newton, they're probably a lot smarter than most of us. I think that's the reality, to be able to do this.
What they've got to learn. It's absolutely right.
This is the thing which always, sorry if I digress here a little bit about.
Go with it.
And I'll wind it back a little bit to football, right? One of the enduring thing when you speak to the football they play in Europe, one of the enduring things that you get from a lot of coaches, well, you don't want to complicate things for them. You don't want to give them too much to think about, blah, 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 right? This is how they speak to their footballers, right? And you get a footballer with an A level and he's a genius. You get Frank Lampard and he's like, the entire wisdom of humanity in one man's brain. I know, exactly. No, he is a super smart guy. But these guys, you've got defensive backs in college, who have trouble writing their names, who can memorize 120-page playbooks.
Sure.
And I just think, what if the other football actually learned a little bit from them? What if you actually made these people study, right? What if we actually sat down with the people who play FIFA football, for lack of a better word, and said, hey guys, you're very good, but you can learn all these things right? Those guys do it. They're not necessarily all smarter than you. And that's what blows me away.
Yeah, you talk to players, in particular the Brits that are out there at the moment, who it's particularly acute because they are in most cases transitioning. So Christian Wade, Christian Scotland Williamson, we were chatting to Christian about his first year on the practice squad and how he had gone in with his eyes wide open, knowing the complexity of learning the playbook and acclimatizing to a brand new sport as well. He knew it was going to be a challenge, but he said, I have no idea just how much information you have to understand and quickly. And if you make a mistake, there are serious consequences. So it's not to be underestimated in most positions, and obviously some more than others. Quarterback, most obviously. But they're playing tight end, and that is not a straightforward position. No. Certainly, if you are a rugby player that's played one sport all your life and you have to learn that in 8 weeks flat or whatever it is. So it's not to be underestimated, that type of intelligence. But how would that translate to football, to European football? What would be the equivalent? Introducing, what are you saying, studying analytics more, studying?
No, I think, well, one obvious thing that you could probably borrow is patterns of play, right? So there are patterns of play in other football, which are generally pretty evident, and they'll depend on the other team. That's something that you could get a lot more sophisticated with that, both in possession and then out of possession.
And using film rooms more, for example. So
absolutely, you could also study a lot more. I mean, I know several NFL teams have a guy whose job it is to study the officiating crew that weekend and know what kind of stuff they call, what kind of stuff they don't call, their tendencies, and so on. I know, again, in Europe, in European football, it's happened. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 clubs that consult with ex-referees, but study the referee, know what he's going to call. Not just like, the pre-match in the dressing room. Oh, well, this is a strict referee, gives a lot of call. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do. Study your opponent, your opponent's tendencies. I think people would be surprised how little time people actually spend. People actually spend doing that.
And full stop at the facility, right? If you compare like for like that an NFL player during the season is, and again, depends on the position, but is in team meetings a lot of the day, as well as training and practice. They're there for a good chunk of time every day. Whereas, again, without generalizing too much, you'll know more than me on this one. European players, not so much.
No, you're talking. I mean, part of the concern was, big concern with overtraining, and they play twice a week and travel. But yeah, generally, if unless you're injured and need treatment, it's an hour and a half training session, and then you hop in the car and go home, take a nap, and then play golf or do whatever it is you do. And there isn't that much of the meetings, even the video analysis sessions. When Louis van Gaal was at Manchester United, like, people complained that it was too boring, and I'm like, dude, like, you make $4 million a year. And you can't sit there for 20 minutes. I know it's not fun listening to Louis van Gaal, but you can't sit there and look at something that's going to make you better. It's going to help your team win and help you become more successful and make more money.
What they need, Gab, is for you to do those team meetings with your Italian accent.
Exactly. Maybe they'll be. No, but I just feel like there's a whole untapped world to that, that you can go and crack it with intelligence, and you notice it too with, you get certain managers who wax lyrical about, the intelligent player who times his run perfectly, this Xabi Alonso, Lampard, whatever. And yeah, sometimes it's by accident, but a lot of it is by design. I mean, Frank Lampard was very, very intelligent footballer, but this stuff didn't just come instinctively to him. He might have been able to process what he saw before, but if you sat him down and you could, because what I'm saying is this stuff is learnable, and it's just not something that football clubs want to do because they're nowhere near as progressive as they think they are.
Do you think that'll change? Because there are a number of quite visible managers in the game that are very open-minded to learning from other sports. So most notably from my experience at the Minnesota Super Bowl, you remember it
Yes.
fondly. Southgate was out there, and I sat down with him and we did a chat. And before we started rolling, he noticed a book I had on the desk because we were on Radio Row. So he came and was doing the rounds there. He noticed I had a David Halberstam book. And he said straight off the bat, "Oh, Halberstam, what's that book like? I haven't read that one, but I've read this." And he knew who Halberstam was, had read Halberstam, wasn't blagging it, and supported that, substantiated that with the subsequent interview, which was more than just paying the lip service of an England manager. I'm here learning and I'm meeting this person and this person in a superficial way. He was substantiating what he was learning and what he was taking from not just the NFL, but NBA. There was a coaching conference out there, primarily North American minds in the room, and he was taking a lot from it. And he was talking specifically about enhancing positional coaching to the next level, and some of the other things you've been talking about. So presumably, even if Southgate is a front runner in that respect, most other organizations, because of the money involved if nothing else, will catch up, won't they? We'll see this happening gradually, and then eventually it will be widespread.
You would think so. But the thing is, people have been talking about this for a long time. I remember years ago, Mike Holmgren, after he won the Super Bowl, I think he either came over or a bunch of Premier League managers all went to meet him, and they all talked about everything they learned. And that's 15 years ago. Like, nothing's actually changed. I think, ultimately the complaint from a lot of managers is they get very little time with their players, and they complain that they just don't have time. And again, I don't know if they're set up. I mean, you're right. In the NFL, it's like a job. Like, they actually show up at the training facility and they're there for 10 or 12 hours. Yeah. And but for whatever reason, that doesn't translate into football. Maybe they don't think the marginal gains, to use a word, are worth it. Southgate's an interesting example. If it is true that he's implementing all these things, I'd love to see him coach a club team, because the reality was, with a national team, you don't have the opportunities to go and do that, it's because you see these guys once every couple of months.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there's a whole sphere there, and when people sort of disparage professional NFL players or even top college players as just a bunch of roidy meatheads, no. There's a ton of knowledge, a ton of brains, and that is one of the things that I really find fascinating about it. All these details going in there, and then you've got the wild variable that you said, the escapism, the one tiny mistake and the knock-on effects it'll have, and that, I think, is part of the appeal. There's many other reasons it's appealing to me.
Hope you enjoyed the Nat Coombs Show presented by Paddy Power Fantasy. There's plenty more where that came from. Just click subscribe to ESPN UK and you won't miss a trick.